Welcome back to the Badger247 show. Once again, I'm Matt Perkins. The whole gang is back this week. We've got John McNamara. We've got Nick Osen, staff writers here at Badger247. And we've got, fall camp finally here. We can feel it. It's August. We're, what are we, 4 weeks away now from Badger football, less than 4 weeks away from Badger football. Everyone's getting excited. A lot of stuff going on in and around the program. Nick, you've been down in Platteville for every practice so far, so we're going to start there. My first question for you, what feels different this year about fall camp in Platteville than it has the past 2 years in the Fickle era?
Man, that's a great question to load it off, Perko. I would say, and this maybe isn't felt as much, but just something, again, worth noting, the culture, man, it really is in a different spot, whether it's like the team first aspect that you're hearing and seeing from players, whether I'm checking around the program, like that's a thing for sure. And then maybe what I'm just seeing with my own eyes out there, guys, is, let's be honest, the roster's in a better spot, right? I think kind of when you look through like maybe and assume too deep, there's just more talent there. There's more experience, more guys that have played at this level. Okay, I'm not, going on and saying they're going 11-1, but the health, if that can stay, they're going to surprise some people. And I think they're just going to be a little bit more competitive than people expect. I know later in the show, I'll get a little bit more into the offense, but I have not seen anything other than maybe one aspect we'll get into that has been a little bit surprising in terms of a good way, if that makes sense. Everything that I thought would be solid has been very good.
I think the biggest question, at least for me coming into fall camp, John, has been what is the offensive line starting five going to look like, especially after the injury to Kevin Haywood in spring ball. First 2 days, Davis Heinzen's come out, started with the first team at left tackle. Obviously, the coaches have been saying this from day one, don't set anything in stone that you see on the field in the first couple of days of practice. But John, it looks like, at least for the first 2 days, Heinzen, Brunner, Renfro, Mandel, and Malman as that starting five. Is that who you would peg to be the starting unit come August 28th on opening kick?
I think that's Wisconsin's preferred scenario, right? Davis Heinzen comes in, wins that left tackle job. Joe Brunner stays where he is, creates that unity along the offensive line. But like you talked about, Matt, they're going to try a lot of different combinations there. You saw JP Benchwall get some left tackle reps as well. He's been primarily a guard. Joe Brunner's got some reps there. I think when we talked, in the summer, I guess it's still the summer, but my thought was in order to get the best five on the field, Brunner would be your left tackle. I think they're a little stronger on the inside in comparison to the depth that they have at tackle. But like you've talked about, what we've seen is it's going to be Davis Heinzen. I think he's going to get that opportunity to win that job. As camp progresses, I think we'll get a better gauge of where he's at. But I think, like you talked about, perfect world, that's your starting five. You got some decent depth inside. Worry about the tackle depth, but if Heinzen can lock up that left tackle spot and you feel good about him, that answers a handful of questions for you on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and obviously, Nick, we've only seen them in spiders so far. We haven't seen them in full pads yet. And so it's harder to gauge the offensive line in just how physical they're going to be or need to be, especially in the Jeff Grimes offense with Heinzen. Obviously, he has a lot of starting experience, started for 3 years over at Central, but he's still, playing MAC competition, not playing Big Ten competition. He has left guard and left tackle experience. Me personally, I don't love the idea of just flip-flopping him and Brunner, putting Brunner at tackle and him at guard. That doesn't seem, to me at least, just based on what I've seen on tape and on paper, to be the best combination. But you've been there in person. How does that line look as a unit working together? What's the communication been like? And do you feel like, this unit could be back up to, I guess, traditional Wisconsin standards after it's been, down for, I'm going to say about 5 years?
Yeah, well, I will say briefly, at times last year, they were a really, really good pass pro unit in terms of PFF. I will say that, but of course, in this offense, Perko, you're looking for, a lot more success running the ball too. And I think from what we've seen so far, so I'm basically just comparing 2 or 3 days, right? Because we're going to see full pads here this weekend, which will be awesome. But I liked, again, in the limited times, I think I agree with you. I liked what I saw from Hines in first day one, maybe day 1.5. There were some pressures that got there day two. That happens. But then I think, John and Perko, if you can do anything to keep Brunner at that guard spot, I think that is preferred, not just from what I've seen from the program's top five, but like that is where he is most likely to kind of hit his ceiling, reach that next level. We all know of his potential. He's good enough, smart enough, works hard enough that he probably could do either. But I'm of the mindset from what I've seen so far, you'd love to see Heinzen out there. Benshaw did okay. I mean, he was mostly second team from what I saw. Obviously, it's very early, but I just, some pressures definitely got there yesterday, which is kind of the time when I was mostly seeing Brunner at tackle. Now, it wasn't just his side. They're obviously coming from different places, but so far, I think I would agree with Matt here that I'd love to see Heinzen win that job, like you said, Mac, too.
Yeah, and I think going along with that, you mentioned getting, there's some guys getting beat there. The defensive line and the edges are sort of the other real, at least, focus for me going into fall camp as to how this team is going to look different, because let's face it, last year they couldn't stop a nosebleed at times. You look at that Iowa game, which I think it's going to stick in my mind for the rest of my life. I don't know if that is ever going to leave. It's the inverse of the Melvin Gordon game in a lot of ways, right? That is the Melvin Gordon game against Nebraska is the time where like, holy crap, this is the best running game I've ever seen. That's the worst rush defense I've ever seen on a Wisconsin unit. A lot of new bodies, a lot of new faces. John, out of these transfer guys who have come in and are starting to really make a name for themselves, who do you think is going to pop the most and be the biggest impact player on this defensive line?
Yeah, I think the first name that pops up is Charles Perkins. He put together a really strong spring. I think he's likely going to be a starter for Wisconsin. But you talked about that Iowa game. I think that's what they had in their head as they, one, attacked the transfer portal, and two, went into off-season conditioning. I want to give credit to Seamus Roy. I think he pointed this out. They went from like an average of like 280-ish on the defensive line to now they're above 300 as a unit, as a collective group. And you look at everyone from that defensive line group from spring into the updated roster has gained a pretty significant, maybe, but has gained weight as they move towards getting bigger up front. So I like all the moves that they've made. They're deeper on the defensive line. I like that edge position of those jumbo edges and what they can bring to the defense. How that all kind of shakes out has remained to be seen, but they had a glaring problem. They've addressed it, I think, the best that they could have through the portal, through the recruiting. Now it kind of remains to be seen what they're able to do once the season starts. But if anything, to me, they're deeper, right? I feel like, the talk was they could play 6 on the defensive line. Now, the question comes, are you including those edge guys? I don't think so. I think they can play 6 defensive linemen this year and truly feel good about it. I'd like to see a Jamel Howard. Give him 5, give him 10 snaps a game. I think he's in a position to do that. So that unit's it's bigger, seemingly stronger, deeper. I think they're going to need those guys as the season goes on because, the gauntlet of the 2025 schedule, they're going to need those guys in the defensive line to be eating up reps and using everything that you have available for you at that position.
Yeah, Nick, I think that, once we expand out to those jumbo edges, one of the names that we didn't get to see this spring was Mason Ryer. What's the latest on him? And do you think he will be back enough from his injury to truly have an impact on this team this fall?
Yeah, guys, I'm sure you could see my smile when you said his name, Perko. I did learn this week, I think based on, just wanting to be clear and accurate on the little name sheet, I think it's Ryer. Based on that, man,
I promise I'm never going to get that right. I'm sorry, Mason. Like I've said it, Ryer, Rager. I don't know. I've said it a million different ways on all these shows, and I'm going to apologize to you for that. Man, I will do my best to get it right, but making no promises here.
He has been geez, you could argue the best defensive player at times. Mason, Daryl Peterson, and Rico Holman, I would probably say, when we've talked about early MVPs and breakdowns. Now, of course, it is very early. But guys, I mean, we knew he looked the part. Now he looks healthy, explosive. You know about his motor. You know about kind of the story, how long he's been out of football. So obviously there's that extra motivation. But I mean, there were times, I'm sitting with, of course, our guy Payne, but like other great, people in the beat kind of within our little room. And we're looking around like, this guy looks like he could be a game wrecker at times. I mean, just the way he moves, like I mentioned, his motor, but it wasn't just in the pass rush. Like he made a couple run stops. I think one was like a 1-yard gain. The other was somehow like less than, losing a yard at the sideline. Like he's got damn good speed. I've been really impressed, Perko. I obviously not looking to overhype anybody, but he's been quite the ad so far through 3 practices or so.
Yeah, I mean, if you get him and Corey Walker really up to speed, to go along with Daryl Peterson, and then obviously, the name that has been in and around this program seemingly forever now is Aaron Witt. Speaking of injuries, if he's ever able to put it all together, we know he's got that physical upside if he can actually stay on the field. But I think one of the stronger units on this defense should be actually the linebackers, and there's been a lot said about especially that starting 2 of Curtis and Allegro starting to fly around a little bit more now that they have some of these bigger bodies up front who can occupy some more of these blockers. John, we recently did our top 30 Badgers for the year, and Christian Allegro was pretty high up there. What do you see out of him as a third-year player on this team and an emerging star on the defense? You think he can take that next step and become an all-Big Ten player?
I do. I get a chance to see him at the local media days. He's listed at 6'4", about I think 247. I mean, he looks all of that, right? And I think he is what Wisconsin wants to have now at that inside linebacker position. I don't think they want those Midwest Mikes anymore that, we've talked about on this show.
Is Cooper Catalano, though, a Midwest Mike? Because
he is.
I mean, he's showing out. He is showing out.
Cooper's a Midwest Mike with a little bit more burst, a little bit more juice side to side. But yeah, I think he might go in the Midwest Mike category. Not to get sidetracked here, but he's putting together a heck of an offseason. He gets up there, gets 15 practices under his belt in the spring, and now I think you would agree, Nick. He's a guy that I think plays this year.
Yeah. I'll add after you for sure.
For sure, but that's fall. Right now is the time to be excited about just about everything. But you look at that inside linebacker spot, and they've had some really good tandems. But in terms of where you think these 2 guys could play, in terms of Allegro and Curtis, it's probably as exciting a unit as Wisconsin's had for a while. And obviously, like I said, they have had some duos there. Jack Sanborn, Leo Chenal, like that was a duo there. They've had those guys there, but there's a lot of excitement from an inside linebacker room, and what Curtis can do now as a full-time starter who's healthy, paired with Allegro, who's that big, rangy guy that's going to clean up everything in front of him. He's got some, I think, freaky type of NFL pedigree to him that he could play at that next level. That's a position I'm excited about, but they do have some depth there too with a guy like Catalano, right, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, John, I think you hit it right on the head. It's been a group that we have talked about every single day, and it is just because it's a group. Okay, Allegro flashes, right? Curtis, you want to see healthy. Now those guys are both there, both healthy. I would probably argue both could be NFL guys. Allegro potentially after this year. I know there's been a little bit of buzz just kind of around some people. Curtis, I think, with his athleticism and just pedigree, like you said, Mac, could get there. But, man, I do have to add on Coop Catalano because, I haven't gotten the chance really to talk on this show. Amazing young player in high school, great kid. I know, Mac, we've gotten out there a bunch of times throughout our respective last couple of years. You look, it's like, all right, let's see what he can do. Good to get there early, right? A lot of guys do that. And then it goes to, whoa, this guy could be in the twos as a true freshman. coming from in-state. I mean, obviously we don't lock things in, right now, but the two I've probably seen the most within kind of that second grouping have been like a mix of these three guys: Garrison Soliday, Coop Catalano, and Taryn Turner. And then obviously Posa, Gauthier, some others have been in the mix, and they've all made at least one or two highlight plays. But when you've got Mike Tressel, without being prompted on any names, bringing him up already, like just asked about young players, I think that's a sign. I know he's very, very well liked and respected by his peers. So I'm going to be intrigued. I think he certainly gets on the field in some form, Mac, whether that's special teams or just kind of rotationally. But yeah, I think we've written about it. Payne has as well. Them and maybe offensive line in terms of a youth movement, I'm not sure any positions are better stocked for the future.
Well, the unit that was going to be the most veteran and still might be the most veteran on the team is the defensive backs, but without Nazir Forkarine, who is at least temporarily ineligible, who has 7 counts thrown back at the NCAA. It's a whole lot of stuff going on. John's been staying on top of that, I gotta say. But the cornerback position opposite Ricardo Allman, where do things stand right now? And assuming Forkarine is not eligible for week 1, who is going to be on, starting at both nickel and the opposite outside corner of Hallman?
If by staying on top of you mean just retweeting guys who actually know what they're talking about, then yeah, I'm staying on top of it. I do not. I couldn't pass the bar. I promise you that. So I'm not going to dive into that legal jargon.
I don't know, John. You're a pretty smart guy. I feel like with a little bit of studying, you could pass the bar.
Well, I graduated from Wisconsin, so I got something going for me. But yeah, you talk about that spot opposite Emilio Agar, Deani Hill. I think those are the two guys you're looking at. I think you have a better idea of where they're at in a couple weeks here, but I think those are the next two up. Then you have, obviously Latimer in the slot. Now, again, long way to go here, but I think there was some talk of, okay, do you bump Latimer outside and put Austin Brown in the slot? He's played there, he's comfortable there. Again, this is like a Davis Heinzen thing where I think they would prefer him to stay at left tackle and win that job. I think Wisconsin overwhelmingly would prefer to keep Austin Brown at that safety spot, pair him next to Preston Zachman, have a nice 2 deep there with Matt Young, Matthew Traynor. Just going back to the key Badgers, and I kind of dove into Austin Brown and the stuff that was being said about him by his coaches, the stuff that he said. His preference is to play that safety position. He said that in the spring. He says that's where I can be most effective. He talked about when he was put in that nickel spot, he saw teams motioning him out to get him out of those, in the kind of the thick of that, right? To get him out of the play. He mentioned Iowa specifically doing that. They would motion a guy out. It would take me out of the play. I wasn't involved as much as I wanted to. I think in that safety spot, they feel like he can get the most bang for his buck, right? To be a true playmaker at that spot. Again, he could play nickel if you needed him to, but I think they'd like to keep Latimer there, maybe a young guy behind him, and go from there. But I will add one more thing on that corner spot. Something Mike Tressel said at Media Day, there is going to be a true freshman that plays this year. I'm not going to say for sure 2 deep or true freshman is going to start, but Tressel basically said, yeah, one of those true freshmen is going to play. Maybe it's Jaimier Scott. He might be my top choice from that group, but there are some exciting guys. I mean, Kario Skanes brings some nice size, nice length. He played in the spring. Jamari Washington, I don't know. That's a tough thing to ask a kid that just showed up to campus a couple weeks ago. But from that group, someone's going to have to contribute this year.
Yeah, I personally think out of those guys right now, Mac, I think it would probably be Jaimier. But Cairo, I've written a couple times, he really looks the part. And then Jamari, I actually think is the highest ceiling guy out of that group. He's a guy I went down to Morgan Park 2-3 times. He's got that size. He's tough. He's not afraid to hit. Pretty good ball skills. So it'll be really interesting. But I think that Austin Brown can be an NFL guy. And to get there, has to stay at safety. I agree. I'm actually writing up our Jack Cooper story for this weekend and was just kind of listening back to some of those quotes. The impressive thing about Austin, probably one of the most unselfish guys on a pretty unselfish defense, he would go wherever he's needed, wherever he needs to play, obviously within this Badgers program. But I couldn't agree more. I also don't think there needs to be a move there because I think Jaimier Latimer could easily, play that nickel spot. And then I do think you trust Agard for the most part. Deani Hill's gotten a couple more reps as of late, but we'll see. I mean, there's still that chance, though I maybe wouldn't bet on it. There's still the chance you get Nizier for that stretch run. So we will see. It's going to be interesting.
To me, like you said, Nick, Austin Brown's an NFL type guy. You had him mentioned by Brady Collins in the summer of, he's a 4.4 40 guy. I think Luke Fickell brought him up kind of unprompted in Las Vegas as a guy that, is a unique safety, as unique of a safety as he's seen during his coaching career. So like he's gonna test well at the combine, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, right? Let's see how this 25 season goes. But I think that he's a unique player who gives you some versatility. And then when that time comes, I think he's going to test really, really well.
I actually want to talk about a unique player on the offensive side of the ball really quickly, Tre Kekahuna. And Tre's journey to Wisconsin, around Wisconsin, has been an interesting one. Committed, decommitted, recommitted, hit the portal, came out of the portal. And he's got a new role this year. I think the wide receivers, out of all the different positions in this new offense, actually might have the biggest shift and change of what they are expected to do. Kekahuna, Nick, is someone who I think we're going to see involved in the offense in more ways. He's going to be operating in the slot, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him, outside more as well, especially because I'm envisioning more 12 and 21 personnel with only 2 receivers on the field. Where do things stand with third-year player Tre? And do you think that he is someone who is going to be, a true playmaker for Jeff Grimes this year?
I do. Guys, I think, like I've written, John, I'm being careful about how I frame things just because I wrote exactly what I reported last year. And then, people were blaming me for losses type of thing at points. So I'm trying not to overhype things. But I think the staff would tell you, too, there are a lot of guys that can and should be playmakers, Perko. I think my thing is just there's only one ball to go around. So I'm not sure the numbers are necessarily going to reflect it. But, man, Tre gave one of the best group interviews I've ever seen on any beat. He spoke for a good 10, 12 minutes with us, really going in depth about Grimes, the offense, the process this offseason, Perko. And so with all that being said, when he's gotten the rock, he's looked pretty good. He's looked explosive. They're trying not to overdo things because obviously he's dealt with the injury bug at times. I like what you said about wideouts, and I think and hope that Wisconsin fans realize they've got a damn good hire, I believe, in Jordan Reed. I mean, we have talked at length and written on this and the show as well with the recruiting prowess, but just the way the guys talk about him. And I think just the passion that he brings, I think it is going to be a room, not saying somebody's going to have 1,500 yards, but a room collectively that we maybe haven't seen since, I would probably easily say the Danny Davis, Q Cephas, AJ Taylor type of days, I would probably say.
Yeah,
where you maybe have
2018.
multiple NFL guys. I believe we'll see what Ballard can do. Vinny's an NFL player to me. Eugene eventually. Tre, people around the program think he could get there. So it'll be really interesting. But kind of a long way to say, Parker, I agree. I'm really excited about that room. And that's actually one of probably the 3 positions I'd probably say wide out, O-line, and then safety I'm really going to have my eyes on this weekend.
Look, like you talked about, in the portal, came back to Wisconsin. Jeff Grimes has a vision for him, clearly, where he was able to get him to leave the airport, all that stuff that went into his story. I think he's going to be a focal part of this offense. But like you talked about, Nick, that's a deeper receiver room than Wisconsin's had in a little while, I would say. There's a handful of guys I think you could turn to. You feel really good. Like Vinny Anthony, Jaden Ballard, Tre Kekahuna is that top line, and there's some guys behind them. And, Eugene Hilton Jr.
Tyrell Henry, I got to say. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, of course, but I felt I was cheating him and cheating the readers. They love him. He will be involved.
And I think that's someone that came up unprompted too of, hey, who took advantage of those reps when Tre was out in the spring? It was Tyrell Henry too. So he's a guy I think that plays a role. So it's, again, I've been on record to overhype the receivers before. I think in year one of Fickle, of like, hey, they're bringing in these dudes. I mean, there was maybe a combination of a lot of different things, but I do feel like there are guys that can play at this level, and Wisconsin can be able to, cycle out a few guys within the game and still feel good about the bodies you're putting out there.
Absolutely. Before we wrap today, though, I do want to hit on one quick recruiting topic. Since we're all last together, Zachary Taylor decommitted from Wisconsin, flipped to what was it? TCU. And now Wisconsin's left with 0 safeties in this class at the moment. Couple interesting names out there. But for me, Colby Barrett is one that I think really sticks out to me as someone who could be a potential, someone they're going to be going after very hard right now. He's out of the Baylor School in Chattanooga. He just got there last year. Before that, he was playing at Alcoa, another really good program here in Tennessee. But Baylor School is arguably the best, and he is on a team that has a lot of top-end talent. I was talking with a buddy of mine who's a scout here in Tennessee, who's a really big fan of him, big physical, athletic kid, and who basically said, yeah, if he goes to Mississippi State, he's kind of wasting his talent. So it makes sense that Wisconsin is going to be coming after him. There are going to be other schools after him too, though, John. Where do you see this safety class going without Taylor in the fold?
It's a good question. We wrote about that this morning. We got a story up on that. But like you talked about, Colby Barrett's a guy. I wrote Brody Jones is a guy. He's a Cincinnati commit. A few other kids too. Samaj Hill. He's from the same high school as Emilio Agar. Tyrell Chapman's currently committed to Iowa State. I think there's a handful of guys that they're monitoring that they could feel probably could play corner, maybe could play safety. You've seen Jack Cooper and Paul Haynes kind of attack some of these guys together. I'll close, but I'll give you some Nick Osen optimism here. A lot of times as we go into the fall, these classes are wrapped up, not a lot of official visits. That's not going to be the case this fall. So it's going to give that reader the reason to log on every day to see who's going to be up at those visits, to see who's going to be up for an official, to see who's the new cornerback target. Because, look, they got some holes to fill at edge, safety, corner, maybe a best available type. Again,
maybe one more offensive lineman.
Potentially one more offensive lineman. I know some guys that they're looking at that are committed to other schools at some of those spots. There's a lot that's going to happen in the fall. Now, look, they missed on some guys. They had some guys decommit. They had some tough blows. It wasn't the summer that they would like to have had. But look, signing days in December. They have all fall, a handful of home games at Camp Randall. It's going to be a more interesting finish to this class than it's traditionally been once officials started in the summer. So no better time to hop on to make sure you're covered in the fall than Badger247.
It is the place to be for all things Wisconsin coverage, and that's a great place for us to wrap here today on the Badger247 show. We'll be back again next week with more fun, more information, more reports from Nick at camp, and all that good stuff. So until then, make sure you are subscribed to Badger247.com for all of the best news, information, message boards, and all that good stuff. Make sure you're subscribing here to the show on the channel. Like I said, we'll be back again next week. Until then, everyone, take it easy out there.